So these to me are some of the most important questions, and I want to bring us back a little closer to home. In terms of where we are, if I look at the situation, there's a concept of climate space. How much room can each person have to live their life, given the acceleration of global warming and given the need to reduce greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere? So if so many resources are being used to produce things like animal foods, that still not a majority of the world gets to eat. What does that mean in terms of the climate space that's left for others? What does it mean in terms of the way the industrialized world has developed its food system with intense requirement of resources, use of fossil fuels, and therefore greenhouse gas emissions? We are making the climate space smaller by having done that. And by having this system of intensive animal agriculture spread around the world, it's further challenging that climate space. I also put this question here: who gets to eat high on the hog? Who makes those decisions? Why are those decisions made? When I look at issues of equity, sustainability, does it make sense to apportion so much land, so much water, so much feed to a livestock system that we know has many negative impacts for the environment as well as for the climate? And those parts of the world that have the least ability to adapt to a changing climate, people who are very dependent on the land, they are being the most affected by climate change, by erratic weather, by droughts, by floods, by intense storms. I do think that the example we set here in the industrialized world does matter. Even though we see the forces, we see increases in population, we see increases in consumption of animal products. It is our lifestyle, it is the way we've approached development that is being globalized. And so I do think that it does matter what we do here. So coming back to one of the things I want to talk about tonight, climate foodprints. So looking at what is the ecological toll of the way that we eat. We mentioned before organic and local foods, and I would say they're absolutely important. And there's a great farmers market in Union Square I'm sure many go to. So if we look at the first point, if 10% of our diet in the United States was from organic foods, that would have a positive effect in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, like capturing an additional 6.5 billion pounds of carbon in the soil each year, which has then, in an equivalency calculation, like removing 2 million cars from U.S. roads every year. That's not insignificant, so I think that is important. There are other benefits of eating locally, and I know Lisa and Jasmine and I like to do that as well. It does take less energy to transport food if it's from a farm within 100 miles or 200 miles from where you live. There are some other nice benefits in terms of supporting livelihoods of people who live in proximity to us, of joining a community that cares about where food comes from. Certainly many small farmers can be quite good stewards of the land, so there's more room for other species. They're not stripping out the vitality of the soil in the way that huge plantations of soy and corn do. But if we look really from the entry point of climate change, which we're trying to do tonight, food miles, this concept of how far does your food travel from where it is produced to where you purchase it, it is actually just a very small drop in the bucket of the overall climate footprint of that food. And a recent study found it's about 4% of the total greenhouse gas emissions from food. So eating local, an important thing to do for many reasons in addition to climate, but in terms of climate impact, it's actually fairly small. So if that's the case, then what are the larger impacts? And I think you probably knew where we were going with this. There's a growing consensus, even though we don't see it as much in a policy dialogue yet or in the media, that meat and dairy are really the greenhouse gas hotspots in terms of food. So a recent study at Carnegie Mellon University found that almost 60% of food-related greenhouse gases come from animal-based foods, meat, poultry, eggs, dairy, and this actually includes fish as well. As Marisa had in her video, the study was done at the University of Chicago, a vegan diet and people like that, so that's no animal products, would result in 1.5 fewer tons of greenhouse gases emitted per year, per person, when compared to the standard American omnivorous diet. Again, not insignificant. The same Carnegie Mellon study looked at, for a year, if someone ate all of their food local, so everything that you ate throughout the year, including in the winter, would have to come from a region, let's say 100 or 200 miles from New York City. Every meal, every day, what would be the climate impact? It was basically equivalent of about 1,000 miles of driving a year. So like removing 1,000 miles, the emissions from that, of driving over the course of the year. And then they compared, well, what if someone ate a vegetarian diet with no dairy, just one day a week throughout that year? What would be the impact in terms of greenhouse gases? And they found that actually the impact of that one day was more than a whole year of eating local. So equivalent to about almost 1,200 miles of driving a year. The emissions would not be created in that way. So again, something to chew over in terms of thinking about your own relation to the climate and food. As I mentioned, there's not a lot about this yet in the media, but there's a growing interest and awareness. This was a recent piece that appeared in the Washington Post, in which the writer talked about, or actually asked the question, why are the meat and dairy impacts of climate not discussed more widely? And in terms of what we can actually do as individuals, eating lower on the food chain is actually fairly simple. So you'll see what he said. Compared with cars or appliances or heating your house, eating pasta on a night when you'd otherwise have made fajitas is easy. A Montanan who drives 40 miles to work might not have the option to take public transportation, but he or she can probably pull off a veggie stew. Okay, I'm coming to the conclusion. In terms of where we are trend-wise, the trends indicate increased consumption of animals and animal products. So the UN's best estimate is by 2050, there may well be 120 billion farmed animals produced and consumed a year, with a human population of about 9 billion. So that would be more than 10 animals for every person alive on Earth. It's quite an astonishing number, 120 billion. Along with that would be the consequent growth in greenhouse gas emissions from that vastly increased farmed animal population, basically double of what it is now. These pictures actually were taken in India, where factory farming, particularly for poultry, is getting quite entrenched. Now I would leave you with the thought that these projections aren't destiny. So even though that is what the trends show, that